And so the idea is that we're going to talk a little bit more about the issue of argumentation, what's involved there, so you understand exactly what takes place, how you need to approach it, what to look for. A few suggestions. First, in framing your thesis, making sure you have a solid thesis, consider the idea of a should statement, if you will, what something should be done or how it should be done. In looking at social media, does it have a positive or negative influence? That you can say that question and make it into a statement. Your thesis will never be a question, folks. It cannot be a question. A thesis as an actual statement. If you are stating that social media have negative influences on today's youth, okay, that's a statement, but it's not a should statement yet, is it? So what should we do about these negative influences? That's where your claim comes into play. And should be closely monitored by whom? Well, should be closely monitored. Okay, so stop it. I have a should statement. And who's going to do the monitoring? Do you want to use one of the ones in your book about Big Brother? Do you want to have, like 1984, where the government monitors all forms of media that people use? Probably not. Are you talking about all forms of media are having negative influences? When you say social media have negative influences, well, do they always? You need to phrase it and narrow your focus. Social media use by teens, because we had a little presentation on teens, so I'm just going to use it for the example, by teens can be very disruptive and should be monitored closely by the teens' parents. Now you've got your phrased statement. You narrowed it down to a particular grouping, not all of them, not everything about social media, but just the use of social media by teens being very disturbing, and the need then for that use to be monitored by parents. And then you would offer probably 2 or 3 reasons why you believe the parents should be the ones doing this. And explain how they could do this. What needs to be done then to make sure this takes place. And there you have the organization for the rest of your essay. Because your thesis is phrased in such a way that it gives a clear indication of the direction that the essay will follow. Often we want to phrase it in general concepts, which that was fairly general what I gave you. But what that will then lead to are more specific aspects. And folks, if you do not have evidence, you are not arguing. If all you offer are a series of general comments or an argument has evidence, which means you have to go find evidence. And folks, be careful where you find evidence. Don't just go out onto the web and find it. Because folks, it doesn't always work. I had some people who submitted essays, and there are topics I let you do your practice essay with. One of them was about Miss America pageant. And some students went and found some information about it. There was one that appeared. It was a quote from a particular individual where he talked about the impossible questions that are asked of these contestants, and therefore it's really not a fair contest, and that it really doesn't serve the purpose that it's supposed to, and literally says the impossible questions to answer in 20 seconds. This is basically the quote. All right, that sounds interesting. Well, the writer of the article doesn't put anything like that in there. I know because I went to read the article. Nothing in there. So, what should somebody writing using that as evidence should have done? Come on. What should a person using that as evidence should have done? If this person says they ask impossible questions to the contestants of Miss America pageant, say it again.
Give an example.
Give an example. What are these impossible questions? Why are they impossible? To what extent are they impossible? See, if you're going to look at evidence, you also question your evidence. How sturdy is this evidence? Does it really, it just sounds good. But what does it really do? Because that evidence doesn't work, folks. It opens up a hole instead. So what makes the questions impossible to answer in 20 seconds? Give examples. Do they ask them to explain that you really can't do that? Well, do they ask to explain their views about eternity? 30 words or fewer. Well, it's going to be a little difficult to do, right? Do they ask them a yes/no question? Are you enjoying yourself? Yes. Good. I can answer that in less than 20 seconds. I'm fine. That's not an impossible question. What are the impossible questions? And by the way, the writer of the article, it's an op-ed piece written for West Virginia University's newspaper, campus newspaper. He was a journalism student. Does that sound like a credible source to use? No. He's a journalism student. He's a few years older than you are. Or not as old as some of you are. How much experience and knowledge does he have about the Miss America pageant? What are his credentials that qualify him to call these questions impossible to answer? Arguing, you have to have evidence, but you need to make sure that the evidence you have is credible evidence. Where did it come from? Who is this individual? That's why I advise you to use certain sources, such as going through the library sources, the TVCC library, the LRC, that you can go through, find articles that are published in qualified journals. You can go through InfoTrack and find some articles published in fairly. Don't just go online and find anything about Miss America pageant. Oh, that sounds good, I'll use it. Well, who is this? Justify it. Explain that. Now, maybe one way you have to validate your evidence, you have to explain who this person is presenting it. And too often what we do, we just find a line, oh, that sounds good, I'll use it and cite it. Well, you may have cited it, but the evidence doesn't serve any purpose. You have to have evidence, but you also have to make sure that the evidence you are using is credible, that it works. And if it doesn't work, folks, what did I tell you about a hole in an argument? What happens to that argument? Falls apart. Which you do not want failing grades on your arguments. Passing grades on your arguments. But there may be a couple of you go, no, I really don't get it. Yes?
Are we allowed to, are we able to go and see what you marked on the last paper?
You should be able to with Insight. My 1302 class, some of them have grades on them, some of them disappeared again. I have to go figure out what's going on. I went back, and so originally I didn't have a grade on it, and so it gave everybody zeros. And then when I changed it to an actual grade or something to put them back in, I hope I got them all back in. But they should all be marked for folks. Have any of you looked at it? I haven't gone to look at your class. Have any of you gone to look at your essays? You can actually go and do that. You can go and look at it. And so, Elkhart, have any of you gone to look at your essays? Okay, good to know. Good to know. So at least theirs are there, so hopefully yours are there also. Now, a few of you did not submit the essay, so you don't have anything. Which, again, practice. I did that. Scored it for you. Hopefully it's going to be a good grade, but if not, at least it gives you an idea of some of the areas that you may need to focus on. I'm trying to address some of those also this time. What you want to make sure that you do is you go through it and you look at some of the areas that maybe I offer you a couple of comments about it. That this is an area you may need to focus on, how you do that, about using sources. Some of you didn't use any sources for your argument, quote unquote, which means you really didn't argue. You offer me a number of general comments. Generalizations, folks, don't work. You can say many students enjoy English. All right? Nice to say. What proof do you have? How many did you poll? Did you read the reviews by the students who, you can do that online? They've asked us to announce this. The reviews of classes / instructors are now available at Cardinal Connection. If you go there and you fill one out this semester, they give away those. If you feel like you're, survey of the course. So, now I want to do it. Cardinal Connection, you have to log in, so if you've never logged in for Cardinal Connection, learn how to do that now. You don't have to do it. I get them sometimes. Reviews are available. It's like, okay. I always love the ones that say, because you can type in a comment, we do too much writing. Less writing in the class would be better. Of course, on composition, you sort of have to write. Sorry. I know some of you are saying that was going to be my comment. Perfectly fine. Take it with a grain of salt. Everything. When you are arguing, though, don't generalize. You may have a statement, a general comment, but then you better start specifying how it applies, what evidence do you have where it's connected to your point. That is necessary, folks. That is part of arguing. With social media, there are a number of approaches you can take. I think it was Miss Humphreys, weren't you the one who asked me if you could use some of the quotes from the handout? And I said, that's fine. I also, that's why I always, I always try to give you the citation, the source where I gained the quote, so you have that in there. I try to give you a comment, then I give you some evidence about some of this, even in the prompt, so you can react to some of that information. The particular one I said, top of social media has generated. Then I said, for example, at socialnetworking.procon.org, details reflect the extent that social media have. And I give you a quote from there. Now, if I were writing as an essay, I would then take that information from the quote and expand upon it, discuss what it implies, and go from there if I were writing an essay. But even in that structure, I gave you a general comment, then I applied it to a specific example, and then I would discuss that specific example if I were arguing. But that's what you want to do. Many of you in your practices, women in combat. Women should be allowed to participate in combat. Women are recruited and trained just as the men are. So why shouldn't they be able to participate in combat? They should have the right to do that. It is a right to be, I know at least one comment, that women have the right to participate in combat. Well, how is it a right? You explain why it's a right? Whatever you have to say, this is a right. They go through. What specifically do men and women go through that qualifies as the same techniques that prepares them for combat? Do you have details about that? Is there evidence to that? You should be able to find it. Don't just make the comment and assert a point without having something that will substantiate your point. We want to, and this is a general statement, we want to deal with generalities because we assume everybody will accept it. So the point of argument is that no, the reader of the argument enters as a skeptic, where that reader doesn't take a position yet. And your job is to show them why your position, and to do so means you have to provide them with sufficient evidence and explanation that leads the person to say, oh, I understand why he or she has this view. It makes sense. Do not rely on general comments in that way. Another aspect, when you do use sources, I've already told you make sure they're credible sources, remember that you have to cite information. The way I did it here, as Saran Ramasubha at HuffingtonPost.com says, okay, so I gave you the interior citation there, or you can do it with the parentheses parenthetical citation. That means you get the, I just said 74% of adults online use social networking sites such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest as of January 6% in 2008. Close quotation marks, parentheses, socialnetworking.procon.org, close my parentheses, period. That would be my citation. I may not have to put all socialnetworking.procon.org. I can actually write it shortly. But I have to cite it. I have to say, where did I get this information? When you use information, and yes, folks, 20 to 30% of your paper should probably be information from sources. When you're less than that, you're probably not using much evidence. When you have zero, you say, look, I didn't take anything from anybody. It's all mine. Yeah, but where's your evidence? What evidence did you offer? No evidence? Sorry, folks, to credit your evidence, though. Make sure that you do so. If you want to use the Anderson Cooper 360 report, what you do is, we italicize that. The title of the program was Being 13, colon, and the rest of the time, but I can't remember all of it. I may have put it in here. No, I don't think I did I? No. But that was, you would go quotation mark, Being 13, colon, rest of the title of the period, close quotation mark. Then Anderson Cooper 360, which is italicized period, CNN, colon, and you put CNN as the source, web. You put the date it was done, which I guess was October 5th. I think it was 5th. And then October 2015, web, and then the date you accessed or used it, which would be any date that you're going to use now. And that's how just the website. You have that available, how to do those citations in the handout that I gave you. But you want to make sure that you cite it. Then during the writing of the essay, all you have to put in the parentheses would be Being 13. So the parentheses, quotation marks, Being 13, close quotation marks, close parentheses, citation, when it's parenthetical citation. The only time you do not put it after is if you do a block quote. After the block quote, period goes after the block of information taken from the source, then you have parentheses, the name, close parentheses, don't put a period. You also do not put quotation marks around a block quote unless you're quoting someone within the block quote. And that's why I gave you a couple of examples of block quotes in the handout too. Those are formatting situations. Another formatting situation, I think there were a couple of you may have done this. Follow MLA format. 1, double space it. 2, if you put a header, which I would like you to have a header, so page 1, page 2, page 3, don't just go in and put the blank header and never go in and fill it in. I had a couple of papers that were submitted, and on page 1, up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a header. Bracket name. 1, bracket. Page 2, bracket, last name. 2, bracket, literally say last name. Folks, that doesn't indicate well for you. Don't follow that. Those are format issues, and I have to mark each one of those. And folks, when you get 10 marks, you're on the failing side, which is not good. But the practice essay was a little, now I'm probably lenient in the assessment of it, about how many marks are on the page. But when you write 2, 3, 4 pages, and you have 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 marks, each page should be clean. Proofread it. Don't make mistakes. Do not lapse into colloquial expressions, slang terms. I had one person that wrote about, again, Miss American pageant, about how contestants are the bomb. Did not put it in quotation marks, which if you put it in quotation marks, it's showing I'm using a colloquial. No, well, no, we don't do that. This is formal writing, ladies and gentlemen. Likewise, do not start sentences with well. W-E-L-L. Well, this seems to be the situation. That's a hemming and hawing for speaking, where you're trying to delay your thoughts and trying to give yourself a sense of time to organize your next expression. That's what well does. You're not doing that when you're writing. Eliminate it from the start of all sentences. Likewise, be aware of certain sentence structures that you are using. Go through and see how often you use the same sentence structure, how often you use the same wording in close continuity. Be cautious with sentences that start with there and here. Such limited if used at all. You definitely do not want to begin your paper with, there are many reasons why. No, just state many reasons for the negative views of social media exists among the public today. Think negatively of social media. You say the public frequently has negative opinions of social media. Be more direct with your comments. Then support. That's again a general statement, but you're assuming that's how you're going to start. You're going to try to build on that one. So you want to develop your idea. Pay attention to your phrasing. And if you don't feel comfortable proofreading your paper, that's when you can get a proofreading buddy. When you look over my paper, see if you are spotting errors that I didn't see, hit your spell check button, see if you'll catch. I've taken to do that when I type your comments, because I type and I'm not always paying attention, I'm not the best typist. I've taken to copying your comments that I type into your little comment box. I take it and put it into a Word program and hit spell check. Well, usually it'll show me anyway. I get to go through and see if there's any spelling. I correct it, I copy it, eliminate the other one, post in the new one. A few times I haven't had any errors. I've been so happy. My typing must be getting better. But, I try to do that because I believe it's fairly important that I try, and I probably slip up a few times when I'm making the little smaller comments. I only do the copy and paste and checking spelling when I do the bigger comments. The little smaller comments, the little blue marks in your papers, those you not look at yet, it tells you what the error is and it gives you an explanation from the source itself. And then I usually try to type something in, at least the first time. If I mark CS, for instance, the first time I will use a semicolon. It tells you that in the blurb anyway. Typically after that I don't do it because you've already had the explanation one. So if you have more than one comma splice, I will do that. With run-on, I typically don't type anything because their little explanation tells everything I'd have to tell you. Same thing with spelling. Typically I don't try to correct your spelling. If you have the word like and you're using it as a conjunction, I usually mark that awkward and type in do not use like as a conjunction. Because like is not a conjunction. It's a preposition or a verb. It is not a conjunction. Never have a subject, verb, structure, action. Well, folks, when you're going through your papers, proofread them before you upload them. Have somebody else proofread them if you do not feel comfortable. Make sure that you are using evidence that you make sure it's credible evidence. That comes from credible sources. That is not simply something you found out there on the internet. I suggest you don't use the World Wide Web for your sources. Go to our library and use our library resources for your articles, or use InfoTrack at Insight. Because you don't always know who these people are posting whatever they're posting on. Now, over the Miss America pageant, for instance, and you had quotes from contestants in the Miss America pageant, well, probably that would be a reasonable source to use since they're quoting the actual contestants. So those quotes would probably be reasonable to use. But some of the comments may not be. What's this person's vested interest? Is there a vested interest? Who is this individual? As I commented earlier, one of the sources that appeared several times in several papers, he was a journalism student writing for his college newspaper. And he wrote an op-ed piece. Op-ed means an opinion editorial. That was just his opinion on the Miss America pageant. What qualified him as a person to speak out on the Miss America pageant? He was a college student who was studying journalism. His face rocket science in journalism, but I don't think the rocket science was right. I actually do try to check sources. If I don't recognize it, or information comes up that I have questions about, I don't go and look. So folks, you have to have a solid point that you express, not just a general statement, but one that has a quality to it, such as a should part. It needs to be focused onto a particular area. You need to make sure that you have aligned evidence to support that premise, where you're going to have reasons why this is the claim that you have made. So if you're saying that social media networks or social networks need tighter monitoring by the U.S. government in order to, that's not enough to just say, leave it there. Why? In order to eliminate predators who might be creating false personalities to attract unsuspecting people. Okay? Still a little vague, but a little bit better than just saying government should monitor social networks. Why? Specify. And then how would this go about? So what do you see that the government's role should be then in order to eliminate or try to curtail predators on these social networks? What should the role of the government be? What steps should the government then take? Those would be your 2, 3, 4 reasons, which you would use to organize and build your argument. First, you show the need. Why does the government need to be involved in this? Show the need. Express that idea. Then, how would it be implemented? What are the objections to the implementation? The idea about Big Brother, the idea about the government always looking over everybody's shoulder, monitoring. Well, what objections are there? How would you then dissipate those? Deal with those? What evidence do you have showing that it doesn't have to go that far where Big Brother's watching everything? That would be a structuring that you would have to follow. And you have to have evidence that you can then put into your areas. You have to have a sense of organization, which means, folks, if you don't have that plan in place, that's why I talked so long about the writing process. And I told you about the need for pre-writing, spending hours of pre-writing. If you don't have a plan in place, if you don't know what your thesis is before you start moving into drafting, you're not ready to draft. Have your thesis in place, have your plan in place, have your evidence accumulated. Then you are ready to start trying to write a draft. Then you have to go back through the process of revising it, where you look at it all over again and you question every aspect. You question it. What did I do well? What did I not do well? What do I need still to do? Those are aspects that you have to pay attention to. Because, folks, you have an essay coming in. This is not the optional essay. This is the first real essay. Now, I gave you grades on the other one, which now, at the end of the semester, we're going to keep that grade or not. For some of you, you may want to keep it. For some of you, no, you don't. And I said I was trying to be nice on that one. So, this one, I'm not going to be that nice on. And I click on the little counter, because I have a little thing I count that shows me how many there are. And I look, and there are 36 blue marks on your paper. Well, I know what I'm going to do when I call it my rubric. I'm just going to go down the left-hand column, which gives you a 0 for everything. If you don't have any sources paper, yep, you get zeros, because you didn't fulfill the requirements of the assignment. You didn't argue. You don't have documented evidence. Those are like 3 or 4 of the boxes. Folks, you have to do that. You're required to do that. Works cited for make it centered at capital W-O-R-K-S. If you're going to have more than one, folks, one piece of evidence is not enough. Cited, C-I-T-E-D. Works cited, centered. Then you hit your space, hopefully you have a cell, double space, go down, and the phrasing of the citation, next line or two, get tabbed over. It's what we call hanging indentation. And again, you have an example of that. I gave that to you over the sample paper so you can look at it. If I need to get you another one, I'll try to get you another example of the works cited page on Thursday so you can see it. From Elkhart students, I'll send one down to you guys to your email. And online students, I'll post one for you guys again. There's already one posted, but I'll post another one. Because, folks, you have to argue properly, which means you assert a claim. You accumulate evidence in support of that claim. It's a claim, and you move on from there. Your explanation is 2/3 of or so of the paper. The evidence is only a foundational aspect that you build from. You don't just get to offer an evidence, a comment from somebody, and then move to the next point. No, then you didn't argue anything. You just presented me some information. How does it link to your point? What are you trying to get across? What is it you really want me to understand? So, folks, you have to get that taken care of. Any questions at this time before we move on to our next topic? Because we're moving to public service. That's our next topic for our next essay. We're through with social media because you're writing your essays. No questions? We're all good? Everybody's happy? Well, maybe not happy, but okay. Well, let's move on then. Let's talk about a little bit about public service. This is chapter 25, your textbook, 650, I think is where, or 630, excuse me, 630. 630 is where it starts, is where the first of the essays are. A little bit about public service. Decades, but especially about a little more than 50 years ago. When John F. Kennedy came in, programs that he really pushed and that Johnson would continue with was the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps became a very, very, I don't want to call it renowned, but it was a very public-oriented aspect for public service. People would volunteer for the Peace Corps and then go to different places to serve of areas of need. Sometimes overseas, sometimes domestically. What the Peace Corps offered was like you can sign for like a 2 or 3 year term within the Peace Corps. You go someplace in need and work with underprivileged settlements, underprivileged villages. Sometimes, one of the big areas that they would go to in the 50s or 60s, okay, was some of the underprivileged areas of some of the developing African countries, some of the South American countries as well. So you had volunteers, as they were called, who joined the Peace Corps. They received a very small stipend, really. They didn't receive much. And they would live in these conditions where they were there living among the people, trying to help in some ways, helping out. Very, popular choice for a few years with college graduates who weren't quite sure what to do after they earned their degree, weren't sure where they were going to fit into society, and so many opted to join the Peace Corps for a number of years. Since that time, the Peace Corps, you probably haven't heard that much about it, overlap, it's still around. But there are a number of other of these sort of organizations that have developed. I don't want to give a timetable for it, but a group called Teach America. Have you ever heard of Teach America? Teach America, a group that, again, allows for people to volunteer. You apply for it, you volunteer, you give a small stipend, supposed to be a living stipend. Depends on what you want to call living. But a living stipend, and you go to different areas of need. Some of it domestically, you go to areas of need where education priorities have not been focused upon, and therefore there's a need there. Some of it actually is overseas, international. A former student of mine, and she spent 3 months in Russia teaching English. She had originally thought about committing for a full year to 2 year term, but she had offered a job that came up also. She was a finance major at A&M, and this job proved to, she'd already filled out all of her Teach America, had written a letter of recommendation. She called and wanted to know, should I take it or should I not? And the job, so we talked about it. She eventually took the job, but they allowed her to defer coming in for 3 months. She graduated in May, and they deferred it so she got to come in September to actually start a job. So she went and taught in Russia to fulfill part of her commitment to Teach America, where she felt she wanted to give back. And so that's part of what public service can involve, the need to help in areas of less than substantial circumstances, where specific needs exist. It's also a sense of where people need to, as the argument for, people need to understand that benefits and privileges in society automatically guaranteed, but have to be worked for and also have to be developed, and that people who help to develop these are giving service to others who enjoy these privileges. Well, the issue that comes up then is, should we have mandatory? That would be you folks, right? And that's the question that your book, in the edges of your book, should you? And I have. Let me get here. Okay. This is a video about a House bill that was published 6 years ago, I guess. I think that's what it is. Class, I'll be giving you guys a link to this. I'm going to put you on pause right now.